Whether your goal is the Citrus Bowl, the SEC Championship, or the playoff, this weekend has maximum impact on Ole Miss football. These are the games you need to watch.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hey, this is normally the point where I tell you where to listen to David Kellum and the Ole Miss home team broadcast on SiriusXM, but Ole Miss has a bye week this week. So tune in next week when I can tell you where to find the Ole Miss Auburn game with David Kellum and the Ole Miss home team broadcast on which SiriusXM channel. Or you can just search the SXM app of Ole Miss Rebels. The Locked On Ole Miss podcast is there as well. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I do want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I do want to let you know that these days, every potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. This is a major weekend for Ole Miss football, even though Ole Miss has a bye. Ole Miss is looking up at the ranks. They're coming in at number 13 in the polls in both the AP and the coaches poll at the moment. 4 of the 6 teams immediately in front of Ole Miss are in peril this weekend. There's games they can easily lose. And when you look at like North Carolina, USC, Oregon, and Washington, somebody has to lose that Oregon and Washington game. And depending on how that game goes, they could slip below Ole Miss in the rankings. You've got North Carolina, you've got USC. Both have imminently losable games. Now, Notre Dame has to have more than 9 players on the field or 10 players on the field at crucial moments, but they can win the game. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're looking at more focused stuff inside the Southeastern Conference, Ole Miss plays Auburn next weekend. And we're going to start out with the Ole Miss-Auburn game at Tiger Stadium. Now, we saw up close the offensive juggernaut that is LSU. Missouri just saw last week the offensive juggernaut that is LSU. Jaden Daniels has dinged up ribs. That is interesting to see. No, they're not necessarily talking about it and what's going on, but I'm expecting Jaden Daniels to at least protect himself running the football Saturday night against Auburn. Auburn's defense is pretty good. They're not as good as LSU's offense, but their defense is pretty good. Now, if you go to the other side of the ball, it's a major case of the movable object versus the resistible force. And if LSU can win, they have a chance to make things start to feel right. This is the first time since they absolutely boat raced LSU where they just played a bad offense. And you have Peyton Thorne and you have Robbie Ashford and you have that wide receiver unit that is not particularly good at this moment. And you think that this LSU defense, that wide receiver unit versus LSU secondary, that is probably a key of this ball game. And you don't necessarily want to think of a worst case scenario, but that's the key. If LSU secondary, their transfers from Southeast Louisiana and Nichols and those guys, we saw them. We saw them up close when Jackson Dart and all that was just about to make them quit. If they can make hay against Auburn's wide receivers and prevent Auburn from having a passing game, because Auburn looks like they have not discovered the forward pass early on in the season. They've ran the ball pretty effectively and they figured out a way to scheme some runs. But the pass game has been an issue. So the question becomes, does Auburn get right in the pass game or does LSU feel better in the pass game? That is kind of the key in this game. I don't know that Auburn can score enough points to win this game. There's a reason LSU's favored by about 11. But it'll be interesting to see how Auburn schemes things up because Hugh is going to have to scheme things up next week. And if he struggles against the LSU defense, he is really going to struggle against the Ole Miss defense. And that's absolutely weird to say, but I mean, it's the truth. But Auburn is going to find a way to make some plays. They're going to have some flashes in the game. They're going to make some plays essentially next week. Whenever Ole Miss plays Auburn, Auburn's going to figure out a way to scheme some plays open. The problem's going to be of whether or not Auburn can sustain it. Auburn has a KJ Jefferson type problem, an Arkansas type problem. Their offense, whenever they score down the touchdown and they drive down the field, A, they need your help to do it. And B, it's just extremely laborious. It's not easy. And that is interesting to me and something that I'm going to be watching for in this LSU game. It's a big deal. LSU comes in ranked like 22nd in one poll, and I think they're 20th in the other. LSU's a decent team. Offensively, they're elite. They're the best offense in the Southeastern Conference by a fairly decent margin. Second would be Ole Miss. But if they can move the ball on that Auburn defense, because this is another true thing that I'm going to be watching for, because in the Sugar Bowl in 2021, and I've brought it up on a couple of videos over the course of this week, Ole Miss went against Ron Roberts, and Ron Roberts had some success. And everybody's going to point, it's like, well, Luke Altmaier was quarterback in that game. Well, he's having success when Matt Corral was quarterbacking that game. So the scheme was what was problematic. The Jeff Lebby stuff was what was problematic. The question that I will have is, how much success will LSU have against that defense? Because Auburn's defense did pretty well against Texas A&M. They genuinely did. They did pretty well against Georgia until the end when Brock Bowers just went crazy. But will they have that success against LSU? Because if they do, you're in for a dogfight on the Plains. You need to just go ahead and get your mind right. It's going to be a dogfight. And if you do not do that, if they do not stop it and the offense gets going, Auburn can't score enough points again to beat Ole Miss. It becomes into a situation like that, to where Auburn and Arkansas and Mississippi State, they're having a bottom of the SEC West type discussion. And there's some players kind of on Auburn's team. This is not the Auburn team that you've seen. This is not the Auburn team of the past. Nick Marshall's not walking through that door. Cam Newton's not walking through that door. Bo Jackson's not walking through that door. But when Ole Miss plays them, it'll be a night game in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and there's horseshoes in that stadium. There's ghosts in that stadium, and Auburn plays really well in front of their home fans. So I am anticipating a dogfight reminiscent of what that Arkansas game was. Even though Ole Miss is going to be better than both of them, I expect it to be more of a dogfight than it needs to be, if that makes sense at all. But that's the first game that all Ole Miss fans are going to be paying attention to, because even those that have not seen Auburn will be curious to exactly what they can do. I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right team for your team faster and for free. We're 20 years in at this point. Everybody knows how to make a social media profile. And making a social media profile here is important because you can add a purple hashtag hiring frame, and you can let people know that you are, in fact, hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You know, hiring the right team member is kind of like hiring the right college football coach. If you get it wrong, you're going to be doing this again in 3 weeks or 3 years. If you do it on your team, you're probably going to be doing this again in 3 weeks. So the right team member can have this positive and measurable impact on your company. The wrong team member is going to mean you're going to have to do all of this again. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. College football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 11 a.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts, covering their team every single day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel, including this one. You will not want to miss it. All right, in the first segment, we talked about the LSU Auburn game and how Ole Miss fans probably need to watch that because Auburn is just a week away on the schedule. Now, there's other games in the SEC and beyond that Ole Miss fans need to pay attention to. And I am really, really looking forward to college football this weekend. But if you look around the SEC and then people that are interested in making an SEC championship game type run, however you believe it's going on, there are people that are thinking about that. These are the two games this weekend that you should probably keep an eye on. And maybe for different reasons. But Missouri versus Kentucky, you want to see if Missouri can actually play and have a chance against Georgia because Missouri is the team that plays Georgia directly before you. And you're curious to whether or not Kentucky at home is good enough to give Alabama a test. Now, it's a hopeful watch, but it's something you need to pay attention to because if you want to get to Atlanta, if that is your personal goal, these two teams are going to play major roles in whether or not you can accomplish them. Our destiny is not in our own hands. We made sure of that in the second half of the Alabama game, but there still is a path to go there. And we did yesterday's show talking about whether or not Ole Miss can go 11-1. And part of the reason that Ole Miss, if they go 11-1, goes 11-1 is because Missouri played pretty well against Georgia and kind of beat them up a little bit. So we'll see exactly how Missouri and Kentucky pans out. It's good football teams. Both of them are really good football teams. Brady Cook, Devin Leary, Ray Davis. He's a good little running back, although Kentucky ran into a buzzsaw in Athens over the weekend. But that just happens. When you get those boys up, when it's one of those 1 or 2 games a year that Georgia is just up, that's on you. There's not much that can happen there. And even when Ole Miss goes down there, I'm just hoping that they're all pointing to the Tennessee game and not putting all their focus on Ole Miss. The other game that I'm paying attention to is the Tennessee versus Texas A&M game. You know, I want to see if Tennessee is good enough to put a scare into Alabama next weekend. Because if you want to go to the SEC championship game, you need Alabama to lose twice and Ole Miss to win out. If Ole Miss is losing to Georgia, they need to lose 3 times. But one thing, somebody needs to get Alabama about now because you're running out of time if you look at that math. If you need Alabama to lose 3 times in the matter of a month, that's not happening. The best bet for Ole Miss might honestly be to win out and hope you get into the playoff. But I am quite certain even if Ole Miss wins out, they TCU them and Ole Miss ends up at the Orange Bowl and it's somewhere in the NY6 and they just beat the crap out of somebody. I think that's how that is going to go. Texas A&M just kind of peed down their leg against Alabama. I thought A&M had the goods to get it done. Turns out they did not. The second half, Alabama pretty well it looked a whole lot like the Ole Miss game. Honestly, it did. And because of that, it makes me wonder if there's 2 losses left on Alabama's schedule, but you have to get the first one, okay? If you get the first one, if Tennessee can pull off the upset and they show against Texas A&M that they can beat Alabama, then you have a chance. They go down to Jordan-Hare and they slip up. Weird things happen down there. LSU figures it out. stuff like that. It becomes plausible at that point. But if Tennessee kind of drops the ball against A&M as a home game in front of 100,000 people in Neyland Stadium, I just don't know if anything's going to happen. And elsewhere around the SEC, Alabama has like Arkansas. Georgia's playing Vanderbilt. So CBS is at Vanderbilt, by the way. How does that make sense? Make that make sense. I understand that that's like the fourth pick of the weekend, but you have all the construction in that stadium. You have cranes holding up a scoreboard. You have just tons of stuff going on of why that should not be a national game. Granted, it's at 11 o'clock on Saturday, but that game this year, Vanderbilt should know that every game is going to be the 3:30 or 4:30 SEC network game that is hidden behind that CBS game. Because Georgia's going to win this game by 40 points. It's going to be fairly easy. The visuals are going to be absolutely terrible. And I just think this is a poor choice. And maybe CBS is doing this on purpose because they lost the SEC contract and they're trying to build up the Big Ten at this point. They're trying to make the best conference the Big Ten. Whenever they do the best game for the best conference, I guarantee you in the next 5 years, CBS is going to break that back out again. So we'll see exactly what happens there. But that is around the SEC, the games that Ole Miss fans should be paying attention to. Right now, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's pretty cool. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. You've been thinking about joining FanDuel. Now there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, it's an official partner of the NFL. Now, this is the normal spot where I tell you where you can listen to the Ole Miss Rebels and their home team broadcast on SiriusXM. This weekend, Ole Miss has a bye week. So other games, you can search them on the XXM app by whichever team, the LSU Tigers, the Auburn Tigers, the Missouri Tigers, the Clemson Tigers, whichever Tiger you're interested in watching, you can catch it on SiriusXM through their hometown broadcast. Next week, we'll let you know the home team broadcast of Ole Miss versus Auburn and where you can find that as well. So tune in for that. Locked On Ole Miss podcast is there as well. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. And now let's go outside the footprint for big games, because I mentioned earlier in the show that 4 teams ranked immediately ahead of Ole Miss are in peril this weekend. And those 4 teams are North Carolina, USC, Oregon, and Washington. Either one of Oregon and Washington has to lose. So depending on how they lose, they could slide down below where Ole Miss gets. Miami plays North Carolina. We're going to talk about that. We don't necessarily have a graphic for it, but we're going to talk about that today. And Notre Dame plays USC. And USC, let's be honest, USC did not look good this weekend. USC looks like a team that can get got. USC looks like a team that is fraudulent. It looks like a team that is doing well in matchups that they are much more talented than the opponent. And once this gets into like playing Utah and playing Oregon and playing, Oregon State, you just feel like USC is going to drop 2 or 3 ball games. I mean, that's the way it feels. So when you watch this game, Notre Dame has already dropped a game against Ohio State. They've already dropped a game against Louisville. This is a game that USC is probably more talented than the team they're playing, but if Sam Hartman can get hot, he can get a win in that game. And this is a chance for USC to drop to 18 or 20 or lower, kind of be out of the playoff conversation for the remainder of the year. Because remember, there's only like 7 games left or 6 games left. So I'm beginning to think that you don't necessarily need to worry about USC. And I'm thinking that Notre Dame might get them. It's on NBC. It's 6:30 at night. There's a lot of games on primetime this weekend. that people can turn into. But USC and Notre Dame on NBC is definitely one of them. That's a big time game because everybody's talking about how good the Pac-12 is. And the Pac-12 in non-conference games this year have been fantastic. There's no getting around it. But now you get to the point where they face the problems that the SEC traditionally faces. You beat each other up. And after the Notre Dame game, this is a non-conference game. You have the Oregons, you have the Utahs, and all of them coming up on the schedule. And then you have the championship game. So I don't think USC is going to end up being as high as they are right now at the end of the season. Just my opinion. The game of the weekend, I mean, it's on at the same time as the Tennessee-Texas A&M game. It's on ABC at 2:30. It's Oregon and Washington. Number 8, Oregon versus number 7, Washington. The loser of this game and how they lose this game is important. Ole Miss does not need this game to be an evenly matched game. It does not need to be an LSU Ole Miss type game where there's a score, it's back and forth, things like that. Ole Miss needs Oregon or Washington to kind of pull this away and win it by multiple scores. So the loser of this game drops from 7 or 8 down to 13. You need about a 5 to 6 point drop by the loser of this game. And the result of it, that is what makes it important. Not necessarily good teams, because one of the teams is going to lose. It's going to help you out. They probably need to lose fairly convincingly and get down a little bit. And then all of a sudden they can be spoiler in the Pac-12 for people that are interested in playoff type discussion. So it should be very interesting indeed. I'm really looking forward to both of those games, but the game that I'm really interested in, Miami and North Carolina. North Carolina comes in at number 12. They're one spot away from Ole Miss. They're playing the Miami Hurricanes, and we all know what the Miami Hurricanes did last week. Okay? We all get that. We know what happened there. Well, Miami's going to be pretty fired up coming into this week. Miami is currently 25th in one of the polls, and they're unranked, receiving votes in the other. The way Miami lost that Georgia Tech game, honestly, it was a season killer. It just was, because Miami was 5-0 or 4-0, and they were moving right along. They were going to take a knee. They were going to go to 5-0. They were going to end up like 12th in the country. And then all of a sudden, the worst minute of football imaginable to one team happened, to where 3 plays that were absolutely disastrous happened. And it is going to be on Mario Cristobal to mentally get the Miami Hurricanes back to an area to where they can fight, which I think they can. Now, offensively, I think they're going to be all right, okay? I think you need to figure out how you can stop Drake May, which this Miami Hurricanes defense is pretty good. They do a good job on the defensive side of the ball. But this is a game that I do genuinely think that Miami can win if those last 3 plays against Georgia Tech were not season killers. That is going to be the main question that I have moving forward. Is that game season killer? Hey, and props for people that are interested in things like that. Georgia Tech just became a much more quality win after them losing to Bowling Green, brought them back down. But another ranked win on the road for Brent Key and Georgia Tech. I don't know what it is. I just genuinely like Georgia Tech. Maybe it's just because they're not in the SEC. I hardly see them, and they're harmless. But I like Georgia Tech. So those are the games that I think Ole Miss fans need to pay attention to. Like I said, 4 out of the preceding 6 teams this weekend are in peril. The 2 that are not is Alabama and Texas. But after that, they're in peril. If something weird happens at the top, we'll see what happens there, but that would be bonus type stuff. Ole Miss probably needs Louisville to drop a game at some point too. Louisville's not good. They're becoming a good story though. And as they become a good story, they will rise up the rankings, especially in the AP poll that cares about stories more than actually production on the field. That's just something you need to pay attention to as well. All right, we are through the bye week. We have interviews coming up this weekend. We have tomorrow morning, we have Brian Smith. Tonight, we have Tom Vanderford. Saturday night, we have Michael Borky. Sunday, we have Michael Katz in the morning. Sunday at 2, we have Russ Edens from Ole Miss Hockey. And Sunday night, we have Ben Mintz scheduled at the moment. So we have a lot of stuff. We have Tom Vanderford coming up tonight. And we will be through the bye week, and we get 6 more weeks of just, it's like 6 weeks of summer. What is it? 6 more weeks of winter, like 6 more weeks of summer. That's what we get with the addition of college football. Remember, Ole Miss is 5-1. One more win and they're bowl eligible. We're not even talking about that anymore. That Lane Kiffin deserves all the credit in the world that is not even a conversation anymore. That's not. The first year bowl eligibility was such a huge thing. Bowl eligibility right now, no, that's not good enough. Because if you go less than 9-3, this is a disaster year. And you have Texas A&M and Georgia. These are 2 marquee opponents. You have Auburn, Vanderbilt, ULM, and State that you don't need to slip up to. But worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, that would be even acceptable by the fan base is 9-3. Isn't that nuts? It's absolutely nuts to think of. And I think Ole Miss has the talent to get it done. I've talked all of the offseason about how this was the most talented team in my lifetime. And they're proving that. They're proving that in the fourth quarter whenever they have talent and depth to actually win games that Ole Miss normally loses. It's amazing the job that Lane Kiffin has done in roster construction. Absolutely amazing. And anybody that says any unit, it's like, hey, we're playing against somebody. Oh, it's a personnel issue. We're just not good here at this position. It's like, no, that's not it. No, not at all. They might be scheming in a such a way that is entitled to where you're setting back up and asking lower level 4 and higher level 3-star players to pass block for 4 seconds against Alabama 5-stars. When you see what they do against LSU and those 5-stars, how it looks differently. It's not a personnel thing. It's a play calling issue is what we're in right now. We have the talent to do whatever we want to do all over the field. There's not a truly weak unit on this team. Now, there's weak parts of the team, like less good than other parts, but there's not a unit that is just weak. There's not like an LSU secondary on this Ole Miss team. That doesn't exist. I hope everybody has a good time, enjoys tons of football on this weekend. Watch the games that we talked about. And next week, the What We Learned episode, we're probably going to talk about the Auburn LSU. So that's homework assignment for this weekend is Auburn and LSU, because we're going to talk about what we learned and how Ole Miss can exploit it on Monday as we come back from the bye week. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Take care.